The workshop today is about finding or creating your own place in the world of work. And that is going to go into how you're going to develop a map of your own strengths and your challenges. So I've sent you the workbook that encapsulates this whole workshop. And it's got more kind of detailed framework where you can use to figure out where your strengths and skills are. Because I think a lot of the time we do know what we're good at, but sometimes in life, especially with ADHD, is we tend to do things that we think we like to do and we're good at. And then over time, there's so many of it, and you kind of grow laterally rather than focusing it into one career. And certainly that's what I found. I've been in 16 work sectors, and definitely helpful to have this framework to bring all the skills together and then channel it. So I'm going to start now. Okay. So a bit about me. I'm the director of ADHD Girls. I am a social entrepreneur because the company that I founded has a social mission to empower girls and women with ADHD through effective advocacy, education, and specialist insights. And I also have a mission to improve societal understanding of ADHD. My background, I am a communications consultant. I've worked in many sectors, 16 work sectors, and I predominantly identify as a storyteller and a multi-hyphenate way before the word multi-hyphenate was even a trend. So I am also a cancer research scientist. That's the career that I had that I spent the longest in, apart from communications. I'm a mother of two, and I am an intersectional neurodivergent. And what this means, I will explain in the next few slides. So within the workbook I sent you, I highlighted the fact that ADHD, as we know it, is one of the conditions under the neurodiversity umbrella. And I'm sure you'll come across this term, neurodiversity. Feel free to also write in the chat box what you think. So the definition of neurodiversity is the diversity of the human mind and the infinite variation in neurocognitive functioning within our species. So not many people actually agree with this or actually see this at first when they get a neurodiverse diagnosis. But the way neurodiversity was explained to us by Judy Singer, who coined the term, is that everyone falls under this umbrella because we all have, diversity in the human mind. And ADHD, autistic spectrum, Tourette's, dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and developmental language disorder and other learning differences, they are the diagnostic labels that people use, to explain medical conditions back in a time when society was so focused on the medical label of disability, where we see the individual as being impaired, and then the symptoms need to be fixed. While neurodiversity, it's about looking at ourselves as diverse human beings who each have places within society, and the social model of disability that makes it difficult for neurodivergence to fit into work systems and educational systems and life, because the social barriers that exist within society, could be a challenge to us and make us question ourselves. So this is a image taken from Do It Solutions. Professor Amanda Kirby came and run this workshop with us, and she made this amazing infographic about how neurodivergent conditions or neurodivergence actually exists, in kind of overlapping, co-occurring situation in many of us. So when we are first diagnosed with ADHD, we have this tendency to really zone in on ADHD. We see ourselves as ADHDers. We have so many of the symptoms and the traits, that come with having this condition. But ADHD rarely travels alone. And certainly for me, I found in the last year that I'm also autistic. And there were reasons why I was very clumsy in my life, and I fear heights despite having this risky appetite. So I'm also dyspraxic. So the infographic I've showed here is that there are co-occurrence between dyslexia and ADHD, is 35 to 40%. And developmental language disorder, which often affects autistics, it's when you have difficulty stringing words together, and it can impact speaking and writing and reading. So the co-occurrence of DLD with ADHD is up to 22%. And interestingly, I came across a stats recently where 90% of people with Tourette's also have ADHD. Then I looked for the stats the other way around. How many of us with ADHD have tics, involuntary sounds and movements, also known as Tourette's? So that's 50% of ADHDers also have tics. And sometimes when you start ADHD medication, this can compound the side effects, can compound the tics that ADHDers have. And ASC, autistic spectrum condition, is the sister condition of ADHD, and the co-occurrence can be up to 80%. And it's a very interesting mix because ADHD and being autistic, they can often sort of fight with each other within us because there are overlapping traits between these two diagnostic labels, but they're also quite different in many ways. So why is it important to know how your brain is wired? What do you think? How do you feel about getting a diagnosis later in life, right? It can be quite unsettling at first, right? But it is such a gift to be able to know how your brain is wired, because after spending a whole lifetime of really doubting yourself, being confused about how your brain works, personally, I was really happy to have a condition that I could, really read about. It's all over the internet, and then on social media, people are talking about it a lot. We're getting empowered, and certainly now is a pretty good time to be diagnosed with a neurodivergence, because compared to 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, there wasn't this positive movement of neurodiversity. So I feel that now, seeing that the neurodiversity at work, movement is thriving, and employers are actually looking to hire neurodivergence. There's a lot of emphasis on strengths, which I have mixed feelings about, but it's good that people are getting the good qualities, of neurodivergence out there, but they should also be aware that, we are three-dimensional human beings. So apart from hiring us for our strengths, they should also learn, what are the conditions that they have to create in order for us to thrive, or, ask us how we're going to bring our best selves to work. So Kate has said that she definitely finds that the medication exacerbates her tics. And after most recent dose increase, I found that I hyper-focus on skin pricking. I'm the same. I think I had a panel recently when someone diagnosed me as being Tourette's because I blinked so much. And I don't know why that is, but I've always been a blinker. So to understand your brain, right? Everyone, I assume that when you sign up for this, you have an ADHD diagnosis. So the ADHD brain is very much an interest-based nervous system. And that explains why, you start things with so much rigor, so much passion. Maybe some way down the line, the dopamine tapers and the passion kind of wanes. And then you leave a trail of things that might not have finished. And then there is the challenge element, where we like to get involved when there is this challenge, because our brain can't stop thinking about this challenge until it's solved. There's the novelty element as well, which I will talk about more later. And there's the urgency, which kind of helps us when deadline kicks in. And certainly I need to create deadlines for myself, whether they are fake deadlines or real deadlines, in order to get things done. The passion and interest, I find, is what make us do things. It's what makes us choose certain careers. It's what makes us start a project. That's really important too. So we have an interest-based rather than an importance-based nervous system that other people within society seem to subscribe to. And if you have overlapping co-occurrence neurodivergence, to give an example here with autistic brain. So the autistic brain is very much focused on special interests. And I read it in an audiobook recently that autistic, it's so important for them to have special interests in life because they are all about, finding this interest where they can focus and get obsessed over for a period of time, potentially a whole career. Because without this, an autistic is more likely to fall into depression. Autistics also think in process where they can see the structures that are needed to create something when they get into a project or, an employment. There are sensory differences. And this, I think, overlaps with ADHD as well, because we all have sensory processing issues. But I was told that if you have sensory processing issues in, 5 senses, there's a high chance that you have an autistic diagnosis as well. So that's how I realized that perhaps I'm autistic, because I have severe, actually, sensory processing issues. So social imagination, this is something I grapple with, because with ADHD, we sometimes get social anxiety, right? And I do wonder whether within the autistic person, is social anxiety worse than it is in ADHD? And I couldn't tell at first because I have both. So, and they told me that when you get treated for ADHD, when you start taking stimulants, your autistic traits can get compounded and it can come to the fore. So you start acting more autistic than you are ADHD. And that is something that is very interesting, right? You start to develop this new personality. Why it's important to know, what you're about, how you're wired, is that it helps you with self-acceptance and self-compassion. Because like I say before, a lot of the times when you act a certain way and then you're confused by it, you think that, oh, maybe I should act like the other person who seems to have everything going okay for them. Knowing this, knowing how you're wired and how, what makes you tick, it can really help you be kinder to yourself. And also externally helps you advocate for yourself, certainly within your family life, where your family might be wondering why you don't help with the washing up, why your environment is messy, or, why do you have certain need for order and structure. And then also help you in the workplace, where you can start to advocate for yourself. But there is no obligation for you to disclose your ADHD or your neurodivergence at work. And personally, when I'm asked this question, I'll always say that you disclose when you feel safe. And is there a way that you can ask for help for those challenges without actually disclosing first? Because it really depends, on whether you have a supportive environment or not. And certainly, I find that there are smaller companies out there that are good with their employees and they want to help, but there are a lot more who actually don't. And then employees find themselves taking their employers to tribunal, and that can be really traumatizing, I find. Although whenever that happens, I find that the tribunals often favor the ADHDers. So who am I? Who are you? So the real you, right? Even if you're diagnosed later in life, right? Being neurodivergent is just one side of you, one facade of you, and it can be really confusing at first because you start to see all of your personality traits within the neurodivergence. But then you stop to remember who you were before your diagnosis, because it takes time to grieve the years that you felt that was taken from you, and then to start to live this new personality. But in a lot of neurodivergents tend to have coping systems before they even get to the diagnosis, because that's how they function in life. And who are you really depends on the upbringing you had, the kind of parents you had, your culture, and your ethnicity, whether or not you're neurodivergent. And then the coping systems also include masking, where you put a persona in front of the real you so that you will feel more accepted within life and workplace or education. And if you're a mother, And also the hormonal cycle, as we know, impacts the ADHD symptoms. And women during the monthly cycle, tend to have more pronounced ADHD traits in week 3 and week 4 of our cycle. It's well known that women, when they enter menopause, also encounter difficulties with the ADHD traits. And apart from this, there's also the health condition that might affect how ADHD could manifest within you. So as I say, being diagnosed later in life would take you through this grief cycle where you're trying to figure out who you are and at what point your coping strategies begin. So you learn to unmask, even if this is within yourself first, even if you don't have to unmask to the world, and this to yourself, where you start to create an environment within your home that works for you and with the people you live with, so that they can understand, who you are and what you need in order to be, comfortable in life. I think really the first place, to really figure out what authentic life means to you is to know what your vision is. When you close your eyes, what do you see your life is in your most comfortable feeling about it? And for me, I'm a bit of a free spirit. I grew up reading about Jack Kerouac. He's the author of On the Road, which was later adapted into a film. And for me, that lifestyle is just amazing. I almost lived that lifestyle in my 20s, where it's just about life, travel, adventure, just fun and, just free. And I love the quotes that he wrote as well. One day I will find the right words and they will be simple. Life, travel, adventure, don't be sorry. And there was nowhere to go but everywhere. So just keep on rolling under the stars. And I like too many things and get all confused and hung up running from one falling star to another till I drop. And now I know why that I related so much to everything he said, and he talked about how the best people for him are the ones that are like mad to live, mad to love and just go all out. And that's literally me. And I found that is ADHD is too. We're all or nothing. We're all about fun and we wanted to do this thing. We have this grander vision of our lives. And then we tend to do it as well. We act on this beautiful imaginations of ours, things we want to do. We travel, we see the world, we really live, and people say, okay, maybe you're grieving the person that you were because you arrive at this stage and you figured that maybe my life would have been better if I just stuck to one thing. But then you have really lived, you have lived this amazing, colorful life and you got here and you still have so much time, to go on doing what you love, but maybe in a way that is more authentic to you and also allows you to be paid enough to live the lifestyle, that you dream of. And that is really what this workshop is about. Because I think about fulfilling your potential, but really, how do you fulfill this potential if you're not, also peace, at peace with yourself? So really to construct an authentic life for me is to create your career by design, that fits what you want within your life. So the central most important thing that I keep coming back to is values. And this I found recently actually is a very autistic thing where we're all about our values. And if we do something that don't kind of agree with our values, we just can't do it. If we can't see why we're doing it, we can't do it. And it is also a neurodivergent thing, it's an ADHD thing, where they have to know there is a point in doing it, otherwise you just won't do it, right? So values underline everything we are and we do. They're the guiding principles that drive every decision we have to make. And it's not written by an ADHD, it was picked from Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, because I love, these inspirations, because you might not agree with this, but that's what I feel about the professionals working in the field of ADHD these days. It's very much focused on the deficiencies, and that I definitely see that, we have a lot of difficulties, but then I don't want to be reminded of them. I want to be given solutions. right? Because that's why you work with your coaches and your mentors. And that's why I tend to get my inspiration from other places as well, not just within the field of ADHD. And what Mark Manson says, that the internal values are more important than some of the more external values, where it can be more superficial. But I've tried to put here, some external values that are actually tied in with our internal values, but something that we need to get from the outside. So internal values, what are important to you internally? What makes you feel like things are going well, and this whatever you're doing is going to contribute to you feeling better about life, feeling happy and at peace. And for me, it's autonomy, because I've tried working for other people, but I don't really like it, because I don't like to listen to what people have to say. I want to listen to what I think is right, so I can be a bit defiant in that way. And that's why I've been freelance and contracting for companies, for 10 years now, because I find it's much better that I'm my own boss, that I'm invited on a project as an expert, as a consultant, because as an ADHDer, you have loads to see, where things are not feeling right. And if you want to solve a problem, how to do it, right? Because we're all about problem solving ourselves. And ownership is very important, where everything that I do right now is going to contribute to my, whatever that's going to be mine in the future. What are your values? What's important to you? And I invite you to really think about this. Really think about this. What's important to you? Because this is going to form the kind of decision-making process that you do at each and every part of your life. When you start to question, am I on the right path? Then you go back to your internal values. Are these the values that serve me? Is my life path aligned with my values? And the external values here for me is family. Family is very important. Having the flexibility, because I really don't want to be, rushing off to the train to get to an office at 9 a.m. every day, only to leave at 5 p.m. sharp, which is what I used to do. I need flexibility, because also with ADHDers, we might have different productivity blocks within our day. Because for me, it's about having 3 to 4 hours in the morning where I can really zone in. But whilst for some people, their brain wakes up at 4:30 p.m. Whereas for others, they might wake up at 7 p.m., and most of us tend to wake up at 11 p.m., where we start to feel really, really empowered and inspired, and then work into the morning. But that's not actually very good, because it interferes with our sleep hygiene. So external values like recognition, respect. And why I think recognition is important for an ADHD is because, okay, do you seek external validation in what you do? A lot of people say you have to have the confidence within you, you have to have some internal validation. So that, you're confident about what you have to offer. But I feel that a lot of ADHD is because of the way we've been wired and having to go through educational system. We look for external recognition in order to know that we're doing good. And there is a term called recognition responsive euphoria that is the flip side of rejection sensitive dysphoria. So with recognition responsive euphoria is when you get a praise, a recognition for something good that you did. And that releases a powerful zing of energy within you, where your self-esteem gets boosted and you want to do it more and more. I think that completely explains why if we get certain praises in school, we might tend to think that we do really well at it and go down that route. So how do I go from where I am now to where I want to be? I adapted this Venn diagram from the Ikigai Venn diagram. So that is the kind of Japanese way of figuring out what you should be doing in your career. And I changed it a little bit, where I incorporated the things that I think would make sense for ADHDers. So instead of an ikigai, the center bit is the zone of mastery. This is the area where you have mastery of an experience or a skill within your life. And these are the intersecting elements that should be present for the zone of mastery. So the passion is about doing what you love. And it's not just important to do what you love because, with ADHD, we can end up dropping something when the dopamine tapers. So this is going to be something you're passionate about that you will dedicate time to honing. For whatever reason it is, you're going to find a reason to dedicate time to getting better at it. Whether you get the external validation that you're doing a great job and or you have an emotional attachment to what you do. And that's what the mission really is. Certainly for me, I had to be emotionally attached to my mission in order to keep doing what I'm doing past a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. Because it got to help people. That's how I see where my career pans out. And really what the world needs. This is really critical because the world doesn't care that you love art. The world doesn't care if you're a good storyteller, but the world cares if what you do and how you tell your story and how you create your art is what they need. And this should also be tied in that it's a challenge to you because like I say with ADHD is, if it's not a challenge or it's not urgent and it's not something you're interested in, what are the chances that you're going to stick to it? Because you have to dedicate time to honing it. And the career, what you can be paid for. And this is also really important because, Jack Kerouac is great. He found a way to really utilize his passion in creative writing. But I think a lot of us actually struggle to find a way to get paid for what we love to do. Then it becomes like a full-time hobby, but it needs to almost transcend out of a full-time hobby. The hobby that you want has to have a relevance to what the world needs and what you can be paid for. And also what you're good at, this is your element. Your element is the talent within you, the strengths, the skills that you have. So we're interests, passion, mission, and variety driven. And I talked about mission, it affects your why. We have to have a purpose and mission statement because at the end of the day, right, do you need a stronger attachment to your career than just to pay your bills or something you love to do? So in surveys with ADHD, doing what you love and getting paid for it come out as the top priority. But I want to help you figure out how to create a career that's going to be the making of you. That you're going to bring together all your skills and all your strengths, into this place. So we go back to the interest-based nervous system, because in order to do anything sustainable in our career, it needs to be aligned to our interest-based nervous system. What's your interest, especially creativity. Do you know why ADHDers are known to be more innately creative? Because the mind-wandering part of your brain that you might have been chastising yourself over for years, that contributes to the self-doubt, the overthinking loop, is also responsible for the seed of your creativity and your imagination, where spontaneous ideas can pop in your head, and like the most out there, amazing creation and innovativeness, can be created in the moment. But the challenge for me was always to capture them in time. And challenge is so important because when you find it hard to stop thinking about something, and you need to solve it, and you won't stop thinking about it until it's solved. And for novelty wise, you need to be dopamine seeking. And that's why I included in that Venn diagram. In order to get paid to do what we love, it also needs to be something that offers variety. And for me, being a communications consultant is amazing because every project is different. Although I have to choose very wisely because some of the projects are really boring, and that won't light up my ADHD brain as well and contributed to me maybe underperforming in some of the projects. So in order to choose what you need to do, it needs to offer you this variety and novelty and a challenge. and something you love as well. What is that for you? What is your hyper focus at the moment? What is your interest? And what's going to likely have a longevity in your career? And passion, as I said, it needs to be something you love and also something you will dedicate to honing. And it's a connection to something that makes you feel alive, right? And driven, where you can be lost and found at the same time. Where to start your exploration? Where you start is to find your moment of spark. A lot of the times this might exist in your hobbies when you're growing up. You know, maybe they are the things that you were doing so much that you don't think about them anymore because you figured that in order to, you know, get paid and live an adult life, you need to do what everyone else is doing. But as you know, we don't do well when we do what society, the rest of the world is doing. We are individuals, right? And we're unique in our brain wiring. So we need to do what works for you, you know, what sparks your interest. And so an example is, say if you love to write, then maybe you start with a blog, you know, you put your work out there and people can see it. And then you start to look for some clients, you know, through freelance and more, you know, you explore more what genre you like to do. And then you could write about it in your LinkedIn, you know, LinkedIn these days, they have a LinkedIn newsletter. So your network can see what you're doing. You know, also this might not be something you make money in at first. It could be something that you do as a hobby, and certainly really important as well for an ADHD, because we can be quite impulsive and quit our job immediately to pursue our passion, but don't do that because you need to have some stability. You need financial stability in order to have the peace of mind to work on your passion, you know, because you don't really want to be working on your passion and feeling anxious about when the next payment for your bill is going to come from. So you love it enough to do it for free, right? Then you're going to probably love it enough to do it whilst you get paid for it. So you're going to find a way to incorporate it into your life. And so with the urgency, without urgency, things rarely materialize in the ADHD world. And certainly for me, I've seen, you know, people have hobbies and they don't necessarily continue, you know, what they love to do because there isn't an urgency to continue doing it, or there isn't an urgency in a life milestone that makes them think that I need to make this happen or else. You know, and there are a lot of ADHDs I find, especially when you get older, that you start to realize that, oops, you know, I've kind of jumped from one thing to another and nothing really came to fruition. And it's not at the level that you would expect of yourself. And then, you know, that ADHD might feel like time is ticking. I need to make something of myself, you know, and that might be when the urgency kicks in, right? This needs to happen right now or within a year or two. So whatever it is within your situation, find that urgency. What could you do right now that's going to, you know, be help with having urgency in it? And novelty, we thrive off change and newness. Many ADHDs are amazing entrepreneurs because of the risk taking, you know, the risk appetite that we have. And many of them also could have the stability of a very, you know, stable career and stable paycheck, but they choose to do something more risky. And that's something that they don't have any control over sometimes because that's just the way their brain is wired. You know, they're wired for risk and newness and novelty and crisis sometimes. Okay. So this is really the infographic to show you how you can arrive in your zone of mastery. This is a thing that is going to be a sum of your previous experiences of mastery. You know, this could be in a hobby or a job that you used to do, what you might get recognition for, what people say you're really good at, you know, and that combines your interests, your talent, your strengths and skills. That's a framework inside the workbook that helps you discover your unique strengths, right? And I personally had a eureka moment when I used that framework very early on before I founded ADHD Girls. And what your talent is, I find it easier when you have friends or coaches do that for you, because they might see it clearer than you do. And this intense passion, all helps to propel you into your zone of mastery. But really, like I said before, you have to spend time to agonize over what the world needs, because the world will only appreciate your interests, talents, and strengths and skills if they need it. If it's going to help you get paid and get a recognition, get the things that you want in your life, the freedom, the autonomy, the ownership, and various things. So how do you tap into this to create a life that you want? So I've been asked this: how do you utilize your strengths and skills? ADHDers are the explorers of the universe, whether it is the physical world or their inner world. They are curious and restless. They're wired to learn voraciously, taking in every detail. And their high levels of creativity means that they can synthesize conceptual links. So this is really cool, right? As ADHDers, we see catalytic connections between things. And that could be one of your strengths as well. That you have the ability to connect ideas and people together. Maybe you don't have to be the person who does the actual creation, but if you can bring people together and you have the social skills to do that, that could be a vocation that's good for you too. Certainly, I've seen a lot of ADHD as a very amazing recruiters. So how you start to utilize your strengths is to own it, right? Because what we know as the symptoms of ADHD within the DSM-5, right? And what doctors and psychologists and psychotherapists have to refer to are all the difficult things, like the challenges that we face: hyperactivity, impulsivity, inattentiveness, distractibility, procrastinator, daydreamer, emotional stress. Enough. Okay, this is completely true if we're in the wrong environment. And where do we experience all these things? In school, right? Because the school was built from the Industrial Revolution and it never changed. There are alternatives, but then the mainstream system is still the same, right? And when have you seen yourself in the right-hand column of this infographic, where your challenges were flipped into opportunities? And this is what you need to, know, and you need to really take some time to explore this and think about the time in your life where your ADHD traits were seen as a positive, where instead of being called too hyperactive, the energy that you have, contributed to something that was amazing. And what people call as impulsivity was actually your creativity, where you could utilize your creative, side when you have ideas that pop spontaneously. And you just have to have a device or something to capture that. And what is inattentive and distractible, it could lead you to see new things or things from a different angle that contribute to something innovative. Something, maybe if you're a designer, this could contribute to a new technology, that the world hasn't seen yet. And with procrastination, this is something we have to accept, that this is how our brain is wired, right? We crave dopamine. So when there isn't anything new, when it's not urgent, we tend to procrastinate. But what I found is that the longer I procrastinate on something, my ideas improve. And that leads to new creative ideas, that is probably better than the idea that you have in the first place. And with being called a daydreamer, so if you dream about something, that's going to be something new there, isn't it? And you can use it for innovation. And being a daydreamer, you could also flip that to call it being imaginative. And with what people know as emotional stress, a lot of the time it's just us having a meltdown. But with being so sensitive, when people say, why are you so sensitive? But I'm very passionate. The best psychologists, I know, they have ADHD too, they are very good at really zoning in on what people truly need. So in order to utilize your strengths, you got to hack your environment. Think about what kind of environment that works for you. Okay, on the left side, there's a normal work day of 9 to 5. And I only put down the things that are challenging here. There are things about the 9 to 5 that people do like, but maybe the hours could be a bit more flexible. The endless group meetings, the noisy environment, having to guess what your manager is thinking. It can be very challenging for an ADHD. Rejection sensitive dysphoria, that is actually the biggest problem, I think, with the workplace, where we can feel sensitive to comments that were made, and we can overthink, if someone likes us or not. That could be very difficult in navigating professional relationships. But when you design your own career, you got to figure a way to talk about what you're really good at and what you need help for. Okay, and flexible working would be amazing for anyone anyway, but I think for neurodivergence, that's a very important thing to have. Having autonomy, ownership, and freedom to dictate when and how you work. And accountability. These are all the elements that are important for you if you're going to design your career, but you also need these elements to exist so that your career could be sustainable. So I go into more details about this in the workbook. But basically, it's about what systems that help you tap into your creative zone, right? This is based on William Dodson's Secrets of the ADHD Brain. He is a psychiatrist who came up with this term that ADHD is interest-based rather than importance-based. And the systems that you create to help you kind of do your work and tap into your productive zone it has to be based on your strengths. It can't be based on your weaknesses. It got to be based on your successes. Look at the past success. What time, what circumstances help you get into the zone? What time are you productive? So certainly I find that I might be productive for maybe 3 to 4 hours, and then I need to take a break, and then I can come back to it later. But when are you productive? So try and do your work in those productive zones. So this is going to be something that's tried and tested, because you're going to know, right? Like when, it's a good time for you to work, and how long can you stay productive? And what structure do you build in to scaffold you? This could be like having visual planners or having a timer that help you, figure out how long you need to hyper focus on this before you take a break, and various things. And lastly, are you playing to your strengths? Because we can have, an amazing system, but if you're doing something that doesn't light you up, doesn't bring out the strengths and skills in you, you are not going to keep doing it for long. And then certainly what we need to talk about also is that a lot of ADHDs also are very prone to burnout. And I'm certainly one too. And so what you need to know to work with your ADHD is to understand how your brain is wired, and then having sort of explanations to yourself, or to other people, why your behaviors are a certain way, because when you can advocate for yourself, it kind of reduces the burden within you. You can then, just tell people about why it is, and then just get on with your life, So also very importantly, I talked about burnout. Got to set boundaries and learn how to say no, right? This is a learning curve for me too, right? Set boundaries when something doesn't serve you or is not aligned to your values and it's going to interfere with your self-care, then say no, or postpone it, delegate, send them to other people, or prioritize you because you're more important. And with such busy brain, and we tend to want to do stuff a lot. You need to prioritize self-care and downtime and chill, right? Seek coaches and mentors, therapists that specialize in ADHD. That's really important, because we need someone who know how we work to reflect, our best stuff about ourselves, to us, and also help us, not second guess ourselves, help us come to a resolution for things. And I think having a coach is as important as having medication, because I think they go hand in hand in helping you live a good post-diagnosis life. Master who you are, because ultimately you are going to have to love yourself better than you love anyone. And it really starts from really understanding what you have to give and who can benefit from what you have to give. And to do that, you can leverage your ADHD strengths and hone them as well, because it's not important to just know what they are. Get better at them, upskill, do something that's going to improve what you're going to be able to offer. Sorry, I keep touching things. So I also said in the workbook that it's not enough to just do the work. It's not enough to just, put our head down and just create something. You have to talk about it. You have to communicate what you have to offer, because no one's going to know otherwise. And you could be doing this for a really long time without anyone knowing. And, it also ties in with getting paid, because you got to show the world what they need from you, and then they will come look for you, and then you will get paid. So map out your challenges. That's really important. I think I'll talk about it in the next slide. And the most important thing really is to rewrite your internal narratives. Forget about what people have said about us, whether we're lazy or weird or, just different. You got to rewrite this. I often quote things that I've read in a book, so I have backup, or, I quote the people I've spoken to, so because you are your world expert of you, and you're your world's expert of ADHD now, probably, because you probably spend a long time hyper-focusing on various different things. And so with life, the environment that we navigate, you got to find a hack for the social scenes that bore you or intimidate you, but are necessary. But most of the time, if they're not necessary, I just say no and I stay home. That's how I navigate my social scenes. So the last thing is to seek sponsors, allies, and inspirations. Because what I find is there are going to be people out there who maybe have achieved what you want to achieve. And they could be talking about you in a room full of opportunities where you are not there. So I definitely find that in order to speed up your place in a new place, in work, that having someone who's going to help you or talk about you in a good way and recommend you and give you credit for what you do is really important. So this I find, is something that women could definitely do with, because a lot of the time we might get sidestep for promotions, unless we speak about it, unless we ask for it. And the inspirations that you get, it doesn't need to be from one person. Certainly for me, when I was looking for inspiration, it didn't exist within my social circle or my environment. I was looking at podcasts of people I admire from afar, and people that I admire within LinkedIn, who I thought would never ever give me any chance, but they turned out to be my biggest supporter. So there are people out there, really good people, who would give you the help if you need it and if you ask nicely. So understanding your challenges will help you map out, your challenges. So this is going to be like how you learn, is it going to fit your environment, how you process information, what you need, and how you can best support yourself. In the workplace, people have talked about behavior passports, but I think in order to get there, you got to be very comfortable about disclosing what you need, in the workplace. And under the Equality Act, the employer has a duty to provide reasonable adjustments. And access to work, the UK government scheme, can help with extra costs, right? So definitely you should be looking into getting the support you need in your work. And some examples of the reasonable workplace adjustments that you could ask for, especially for an ADHD, a support worker is so important. Having coaching, executive functioning coaching, a support worker for admin. I have a VA, but I can't call it a VA because it's sponsored by Access to Work. So she's a support worker, and well-being support is indispensable for an ADHD. having flexibility, I spoke about before, having accountability, because if no one keeps us accountable, they will never see our work. And having short, regular check-in rather than long meetings, because we might fall asleep during long meetings. And being aware as well of how you learn, is so important, because maybe you won't read a whole paragraph of text, but you will listen to it through audio, or you could have a screen reader, could help you read it. And whether you're a visual person, so more kind of infographics, more kind of visual stuff would work better for you. And having clear and alternative communication styles, certainly that's very important in an ADHD's work life, because a lot of the time when people are speaking to us verbally, we hear none of it and we don't retain any of it, but to have it written down is really valuable. So in terms of the environment, definitely if you're also autistic, having a noise cancellation headphones is amazing to help us navigate the sensory issues. Having consistent workspace so we don't feel nervous about whether or not we're going to have a place to work. And this might be less important if you're able to keep working from home. And then the assistive technology, these are just some examples of tech that could help. And I'm also going to post some new tech in the Instagram after this. And then very importantly, it takes time for you to understand what you find challenging, because a lot of the time with access to work, they certainly do like an assessment in the beginning, and then they give you everything you need, and then that's the end of it. You never hear anything back. But with the workplace, and definitely if you're working with your employer to figure out what you need, then you definitely need to have a later check-in. So another round of check-in afterwards to see if things are still working or not, or if you can request something new, because then it gives you a chance to figure it out yourselves and journal your challenges. So very importantly is that just because you're going to do a career pivot, it doesn't mean that you're going to have the burnout. Because I know how important it is to soothe our nervous system. If you need to get the help to regulate this, then do it. These are some of the important elements, that could help you in your well-being from morning to night. And then with the hormonal cycle, we've got to be mindful of it as well on a monthly basis. So thank you so much for listening. This is me. I hope this workshop was helpful.